I know what you were thinking. You were thinking, who is this man to tell me I shouldn't find love again? Who is this man to tell me that my heart should close at 60? That my need for companionship should die just because a number on a calendar says I'm old? And I hear you. I understand why that reaction is the first one that rises up. Because the world has told you that love is the answer to everything. That being alone is a failure, that finding someone new after loss is a sign of strength and resilience and moving forward. And I am not going to tell you that love is bad. Love is the most powerful force on this earth. But I am going to tell you something that nobody else will tell you. Something that the people around you are too polite or too afraid or too invested in their own comfort to say out loud. Remarrying after 60 is one of the most dangerous decisions a person can make. Not always, not for everyone, but far more often than anyone admits. And the reason nobody talks about it is because the consequences fall on the person least equipped to recover from them. You, the elder, the one who has already given a lifetime, the one who has already been broken and rebuilt and broken again. The one who has the least time left to waste and the most to lose. Let me start with the thing that nobody wants to hear. When you remarry after 60, you are not just marrying a person. You are marrying a situation. You are marrying their debt, their health problems, their family, their children who may not want you there, their grandchildren who will never see you the way they saw the person you replaced, their habits that were formed over 60 years and will not change for you no matter how much they promise. Their grief that they may not have fully processed. Their expectations that were shaped by someone else's love. You are walking into a fully built house and trying to rearrange the furniture. And the house doesn't want to be rearranged. The house was built for someone else. And every time you try to hang a new picture on the wall, you find a nail hole where the old one used to be, and you are reminded every single day that you are the replacement, not the original, the replacement. And that feeling, that quiet, persistent awareness that someone was here before you, and that person is still present in the photographs on the shelf, and the recipes in the kitchen, and the way your new spouse says a name in their sleep that isn't yours, that feeling will eat you alive if you are not prepared for it. And most people are not prepared for it, because nobody warned them. I want to tell you what I have seen happen, because I have seen this play out more times than I can count in our community and in every community around us. A person over 60 loses their spouse, and the grief hits them like a wall. It flattens them. It takes away their appetite and their sleep and their will to get out of bed in the morning. And that grief is appropriate. It is sacred. It is the price you pay for having loved someone deeply for decades. But the grief is also terrifying, because underneath the grief is something even more frightening. Loneliness. The kind of loneliness that has weight. The kind that sits on your chest at 3 in the morning and makes it hard to breathe. The kind that turns a house into a tomb. And in that loneliness, in that desperate need to fill the silence, a person makes a decision. They decide to find someone new. Not because they have healed, not because they are ready, because they are afraid. Afraid of the silence, afraid of the empty bed, afraid of eating alone for the rest of their life. And fear is the worst foundation for any decision, especially a decision as permanent as marriage. I knew a man named Donald who lost his wife of 38 years, Martha. They had built a beautiful life together, raised 3 children, built a home with their own hands, grew old together the way people are supposed to grow old, side by side, step by step. And when Martha passed, Donald fell apart, completely. He didn't eat for days. He didn't leave the house for weeks. His children were worried sick. And then, about 8 months after Martha passed, Donald met a woman named Shirley at a church social. Shirley was kind. Shirley was warm. Shirley paid attention to him in a way that made the loneliness retreat, even if only for an hour. And Donald, still raw, still bleeding from the loss of Martha, latched onto that warmth like a drowning man latches onto a piece of wood. They were married within 6 months, and for the first few weeks Donald felt better. The house wasn't silent anymore. There was someone across the table, someone in the bed beside him, someone to talk to in the morning. But then the reality started to settle in. Shirley didn't cook the way Martha did, and Donald knew he shouldn't compare. He knew it was unfair. But the tongue has a memory that the mind cannot override, and every meal that didn't taste like Martha's was a small reminder of what was gone. Shirley rearranged the kitchen. She moved things that Martha had placed decades ago. She didn't know the history of those placements. She didn't know that the blue bowl on the 3rd shelf was where Martha kept the sugar because her mother had kept it in the same kind of bowl. She didn't know that the hook by the back door was where Martha hung her apron, and nobody was supposed to hang anything else there. She didn't know any of this because nobody told her, and she couldn't have known because these things aren't written down anywhere. They live in the air of a home, in the invisible architecture of a life built by 2 specific people over decades. And when a new person walks in and starts changing that architecture, even innocently, even with love, it feels like demolition. It feels like the last traces of the person you lost are being erased. And Donald started to resent Shirley, not because she was bad, because she wasn't Martha, and nobody could be. Before I share the next teaching, one quick thing. Everything I have been pulling out of these old ways, the teachings about protecting your peace after 60, about understanding loneliness, about making your last years count. I have written it all down, 20 teachings, 4 parts, in the order they were meant to be received. It is called The Native Way. Link is in the comments of the video. But stay right here, because what I am about to say next is the part that people who have been through this tell me they wish someone had said to them years ago. Donald and Shirley lasted 2 years. The divorce was ugly, not violent. Just ugly in the way that late-life divorces are ugly. Financially devastating. Emotionally exhausting. Shirley took half of the assets that Donald and Martha had spent 38 years building. That is the law. And the law doesn't care that those assets were built by a different marriage. Shirley had a legal right to them, and she took them. Not because she was greedy, because she was hurt. Because she had given up her own apartment and her own life to move into a house that never accepted her. And now she needed to start over. And starting over at 67 requires money. So she took what the law said was hers. And Donald was left in a house that Martha built, with half the savings that Martha saved, wondering how a decision made from loneliness could have cost him so much. I tell you that story not to scare you. I tell it to wake you up. Because Donald's story is not rare. It is happening every single day, in every community. Older people rushing into marriages because the silence is too loud, and paying a price that they cannot afford at a stage of life where recovery is not guaranteed. I want to talk about the financial reality, because nobody talks about this either, and it is the part that destroys people. When you marry after 60, you are merging 2 lifetimes of financial decisions. Their debts become your problem. Their children's expectations about inheritance become your problem. Their medical expenses, which will only increase with age, become your problem. And if the marriage fails, which statistically it is more likely to than not for remarriages later in life, you will divide assets that took you a lifetime to build with a person who had no part in building them. I have seen widows lose their homes. I have seen widowers lose their savings. I have seen children watch their parents' estate, the estate their mother or father worked their entire life to build, get split with a stranger who was in the picture for 3 years. And the bitterness that creates within families lasts generations. It poisons relationships between parents and children, between siblings, between people who loved each other before the remarriage and can barely speak to each other after. I also want to talk about the children, because when you remarry after 60, you are not just affecting yourself, you are affecting every person in your family. Your children will never fully accept the new person. I am sorry to say that so bluntly, but it is the truth in the vast majority of cases. They may be polite, they may smile, they may say the right things at dinner, but inside, in the place where their grief lives, they will see that new person sitting in their mother's chair or sleeping in their father's bed, and something inside them will tighten, something inside them will resist. Not because they don't want you to be happy, because their grief has not been consulted, their loss has not been honored. You have moved on, but they haven't, and your moving on feels to them like a betrayal of the person they lost. It shouldn't feel that way, but it does, and pretending it doesn't only makes it worse. I want to tell you about a woman named Gloria. Gloria was 64 when her husband Ray passed. They had been married for 41 years. They had 2 sons and a daughter. And Gloria grieved the way a woman grieves a love that deep. She grieved with her whole body. She lost weight. She couldn't sleep. She wandered through the house touching things Ray had touched, sitting in his chair, wearing his old sweater because it still smelled like him. And after about a year, Gloria started to feel the loneliness settling in. The permanent kind. The kind that doesn't lift in the morning. And a friend introduced her to a man named Victor. Victor was 68, recently divorced, charming, attentive. He called Gloria every morning and every evening. He brought her flowers. He took her to dinner. He made her feel seen for the first time in a year. And Gloria fell. Not in love, exactly. Into relief. She fell into the relief of not being alone. And she married Victor 11 months after meeting him. The first sign of trouble was the money. Victor had debts that he hadn't mentioned, credit cards, a second mortgage on a property Gloria didn't know about, medical bills from a procedure he had before they met. And suddenly Gloria, who had been financially secure on Ray's pension and their savings, was helping pay for another man's past. The second sign was the family. Gloria's daughter refused to come to the wedding. Her oldest son came but barely spoke. Her youngest tried to be supportive but couldn't hide the pain in his eyes when he saw Victor standing where his father used to stand. The family gatherings that used to be warm and loud and full of love became stiff and awkward and short. People made excuses to leave early. Conversations stayed on the surface. The easy intimacy that the family had shared for decades was gone, replaced by politeness. And politeness between family members is the most painful sound in the world because it means the real connection has left the room. The third sign was Victor himself. Once the newness wore off, once the courtship was over and the daily reality set in, Victor was not the man who brought flowers. Victor was impatient. Victor was critical. Victor didn't like the way Gloria kept the house. He didn't like her cooking. He didn't like her friends. He didn't like that she still had photographs of Ray on the wall. He said it made him feel like a guest in someone else's life. And he was right about that part. He was a guest. The house belonged to Gloria and Ray. The memories belonged to Gloria and Ray. The life that Victor was trying to step into was a life that had been built by 2 other people over 4 decades. And no amount of charm or flowers could change that. Gloria and Victor separated after 3 years, not divorced, separated. because Gloria couldn't afford a divorce. The legal fees, the division of assets, the complexity of untangling two lives that should never have been tangled in the first place. Gloria is 70 now. She lives in the same house. Victor lives in an apartment across town, and they are technically still married. And Gloria told me, with tears in her eyes, she said, "I traded my peace for company, and the company wasn't worth it." That is the story I hear over and over again. Different names, different details, same ending. A person trades their peace for company because the silence was too frightening, and the company turns out to be more expensive than the silence ever was. Now, I want to be fair. I want to acknowledge that there are people who remarry after 60 and it works beautifully. I have seen it. It's rare, but it happens. And when it works because both people went into it with their eyes open. Both people had fully grieved their previous spouse. Both people had lived alone long enough to know the difference between wanting someone and needing someone. Both people had separate financial arrangements that protected what they built in their previous life. Both people had families that were included in the decision and given time to adjust. Those marriages can be beautiful, but they are the exception. And most people don't have the patience or the self-awareness to meet all of those conditions. Most people remarry from loneliness, from fear, from the desperate need to fill a silence that they haven't yet learned to sit with. And that is what I really want to talk about. Learning to sit with the silence. Because that is the alternative that nobody offers you. Nobody says, "What if being alone is not a problem to be solved? What if it's a chapter to be lived? What if the years after your spouse passes are not empty years, but sacred years? Years where you finally have the space to discover who you are without being half of a couple. Years where you can wake up in the morning and decide what you want without consulting anyone. Years where you can grieve fully, deeply, without feeling guilty for ruining someone else's day with your sadness. What if those years are a gift that most people never unwrap because they're too busy trying to find someone to fill the space? I want to talk about what being alone actually teaches you, because our tradition has always understood that solitude is not punishment. Solitude is education. When you are alone, truly alone, with no one to perform for and no one to take care of and no one to distract you from yourself, you meet someone you have been avoiding your entire life. Yourself, the real one. Not the husband, not the wife, not the provider, not the caretaker. The person underneath all those roles. And that person might surprise you. That person might have interests you never explored because married life didn't leave room for them. That person might have opinions you never voiced because you were always compromising. That person might have a sense of humor you forgot about because you were too busy being responsible. That person has been waiting patiently inside you for 60 years, standing politely in the background while you played all the other roles life asked you to play. And now, for the first time, that person has the stage to themselves. Don't fill that stage with someone new before you've given yourself a chance to perform. I knew a woman named Ruth who lost her husband at 61, and her friends immediately started the campaign. "You need to get back out there. You're too young to be alone. There are plenty of good men who would love a woman like you." And Ruth listened to it for about 6 months. And then one morning she woke up and she said out loud to herself in the mirror, "I don't want a good man. I want to learn how to paint." And she laughed because it sounded ridiculous. But she went to the art supply store that afternoon and she bought a canvas and some brushes and she painted the ugliest thing anyone has ever seen. And she hung it on her wall. And she looked at it every morning and it made her happy. Not because it was good, because it was hers. She made it, alone, for no one but herself. Ruth painted every day for the next 12 years. She filled her house with color. She joined a class. She made friends who talked about light and shadow instead of ailments and medications. She traveled to places she wanted to see so she could paint them. She became someone she never knew existed inside her. And she told me once, she said, "If I had remarried, I never would have found her. I would have gone right back to being someone's wife, and I would have missed the best version of myself." My uncle lost his wife when he was 63, and everyone around him immediately started trying to set him up. Friends, family, neighbors, everyone had someone for him. A nice woman from church, a widow down the road, a cousin's friend who was also alone. And my uncle smiled at every suggestion and said, "I appreciate it, but I'm not looking." And people thought he was depressed. They thought he was giving up. They thought he was going to sit in that house and fade away. But that's not what happened. My uncle took the years after his wife passed, and he did something extraordinary. He learned who he was. For the first time in 40 years, he wasn't someone's husband. He wasn't someone's provider. He wasn't half of anything. He was just himself. And he discovered that himself was someone he had never spent any time with. He started fishing again, something he loved as a boy but had given up because married life didn't leave time for it. He started reading, books he had wanted to read for decades. He started walking the land the way his father used to walk it, slowly, with attention, noticing things he had walked past 1,000 times without seeing. He learned how to cook for himself, not well at first, but eventually he could make a meal that satisfied him, and that was enough. He learned how to be alone without being lonely. And that is the key. That is the teaching I want to leave you with. There is a difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is a circumstance. Being lonely is a state of mind. And you can be alone and deeply at peace, just as you can be married and deeply lonely. The marriage doesn't fix the loneliness. Only you can fix the loneliness. And you fix it not by finding another person to fill the silence. You fix it by filling the silence yourself, with your own voice, your own interests, your own purpose, your own relationship with the years you have left. My uncle lived another 19 years after his wife passed. 19 years. And he told me near the end that those 19 years were the most peaceful years of his entire life. Not the happiest, the most peaceful. And peace, at that age, is worth more than happiness. Because happiness comes and goes. Peace stays, if you let it. My uncle didn't need another person to complete him. He wasn't half a man without a woman beside him. He was whole. He had always been whole. He just never had the space to realize it because married life, beautiful as it was, had never given him the room to stand completely alone and discover that he could. That discovery, the discovery that you are enough on your own, is the most valuable thing a person over 60 can find. More valuable than a new spouse, more valuable than a new romance, more valuable than anything the world can offer you in exchange for your solitude. You are enough. Alone, in the quiet house, with the empty chair across from you. You are enough, and the person you lost would tell you the same thing if they could. If what you heard today stayed with you, the book is there. The Native Way, 20 teachings, 100 pages, written the way I would speak to you if we were sitting together. Link is in the description of the video. Read one chapter. Sit with it. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, do you agree or disagree and why? I want the honest answer. I read every comment. And if this is the kind of conversation you have been looking for, subscribe to this channel. We are not collecting viewers here. We are collecting people who remember. Come back next week. I am not done teaching yet.